everyone. Welcome to the Cārvāka podcast. This is your host, Kushalmehra. All right, today's podcast is obviously on the FTX scandal fall. I don't know what to call it, and Sam Bankman. Now, just to give you a brief background, a few days ago, I think it was in mid-November, I came across an article or an essay that was written by Ashley in the Tablet magazine, the one you see on the screen, and I read it. Now, full disclosure, I was reading on this whole thing and I was not able to understand it. And the more I read it, and like this is one of those rare scandals or scams where you go WTF and say, what, this can happen too. And then when Ashley's piece came out, and I immediately reached out to Ashley, I was like, my mind doesn't work. So I told him, you have to come and explain this shit to me, and Ashley happily agreed. So buddy, welcome back to the podcast. It's always nice to talk to you.
Thank you, Kushal.
All right, Ashley, maybe we'll start here for the uninitiated who maybe do not know what the hell this scandal or scam is. So we start with the working assumption that nobody knows what the scam is, and start there. First, explain to everyone what the hell happened.
Basically, what looks like you had this cryptocurrency exchange, FTX, which was one of the big boys out of like two or three of the big players in crypto exchange, where you could go trade crypto online and a kind of nice interface. That was the big selling point. It was previously kind of hard to do it on some of these websites, and this website FTX comes along, and you could go put money into it, trade, and then FTX becomes like the brand name of the Nike of crypto exchanges. Partnerships with major celebrities, with news organizations, with politicians. I mean, they really didn't hold back. So what ended up happening, it turns out, is that FTX was illiquid, meaning there wasn't enough money in their coffers, in their own accounts, to cover the obligations that they had, including and primarily to their own customers. So the money that you saw as a number in your FTX account wasn't actually there. And it turned out what they were really doing, it seems, allegedly, I'll say for the lawyers, is they were using that money deposited by FTX customers to invest it in the founder of FTX, who's a man named Sam Bankman-Fried. He ran a private crypto investment firm called Alameda Research, and they were taking the money out of FTX, out of customers' own accounts, and investing it for their own private purposes through Alameda Research in a variety of different kinds of investments. Then it all kind of blew up when a different crypto exchange decided to liquidate its holdings of FTX's own currency, FTT. That set a domino effect in motion that led to the collapse of FTX within a day or two, not much more than that.
Yep. When I was going through this, obviously everything we say has to be caveated by the word allegedly, because that's just the way the cookie crumbles these days. But I mean, this looks like your classic Ponzi scheme. I don't know what else to call it. I mean, as I was reading this and I was trying to understand, I was like, wait, this can happen too? And I still cannot digest that this happened. Like, how the hell did this was happening in broad daylight? Like, when I was doing my research, and I don't know if you came across this thread on social media too. This was like their bankruptcy court filing, and I went through this thread, and I want to share this with people. How the hell can they do this? This is on Twitter, somebody shared, this is the reimbursements over chat, and a random manager would accept or reject those reimbursement with an emoji. What?
Yeah. And it was all, they ran the entire business on Google Sheets.
Like this entire thread is insane.
Yeah.
They loaned the director of engineering Nishad Singh 543 million. Barely any records were kept. Most decisions were made over chat. Over chat.
Yeah.
And messages are deleted. I mean, I was just going through these things. They don't have any proper records of anything. This was the killer. Corporate funds were used to purchase personal use real estate, and employees and executives put their names on homes purchased with company funds. What the
Yeah.
hell? How,
Yeah.
how can something like this happen in broad daylight and nobody observes it? Like, is this very common?
I don't know. I wonder. I mean, I think it's a hallmark of financial scandals where you see the founders using corporate funds to fund their own lifestyle. I mean, a great example was DeLorean, the car maker. That's exactly what he was doing that got him into so much trouble. He was using corporate funding from investors that was meant to build and run the factory to buy art and buy Ferraris and buy mansions. And it's one of those, like, it's almost like if you have fraud, this is one of those pieces that almost always exists where these really high profile flamboyant founders, they pull money out of the company to run their own lifestyle in a very outsized. And what it shows is that it was never really about the business, because you look at Elon Musk, who did the opposite. Elon Musk was taking money out of his own personal bank account to fund Tesla when Tesla got into trouble in 2000, whatever it was, 2012 13, when it was touch and go. He would put his entire fortune on the line to keep the company afloat, to make payroll. These guys did the exact opposite. They raided the corporate coffers in order to basically have a good time, live in a $40 million penthouse in the Bahamas. And how often does that go on? Who knows? Probably more than most of us assume. But with crypto, this was a company run out of the Bahamas, previously run out of Hong Kong. It was not regulated by a responsible financial regulator, in part because the regulations that have been developed to deal with crypto seem to be behind the curve. And there has not been, in the United States at least, a robust regulatory framework for crypto. So a lot of these companies basically end up offshore, and then they do what they want. And that's what they did.
Yeah, and this leads us to the dark and larger question about financial regulation in general, where this is the classic dichotomy, right, between free market principles and regulation, because free market principles are always like less regulation is always better. But then where do we parse this? Like, I'm pretty much for free markets. I'm always for lesser regulation. I've always been libertarian. But the point is, when something like this comes about, a person like me does not know how to answer it. Like how do I explain this to someone, as someone who genuinely supports libertarianism? The government should pretty much stay out of my life. But then somebody comes, and in evolutionary terms, I would call this the free rider problem. This is a free rider, right? This riding on the system.
Yeah. I think it's one of these things where the pendulum swings too far in either direction, because on the one hand, you get such an incredible amount of overregulation in so many economies and so many governments that we end up saying, just stay out of it because you're making it worse. I mean, I know as an example, in the UK, right now where I am, the country is facing basically a collapse of its health system and sort of the teetering of its economic system as well. It is in a very bad economic situation. My wife the other day wanted to get a goldfish for our children and called the pet shop to get a goldfish and a fish bowl. As you know, we grew up with fish bowl, goldfish, and goes in a fish bowl. They refused to sell us a fish bowl. It's illegal to put a goldfish in a fish bowl in the United Kingdom, and it is regulated. This is the kind of thing that they're worried about, while their health system is collapsing around them. So what happens is governments go all in on minutia. How wide can someone's front lawn be? How much water can they give it? Are you parked in the right place? Can you build a building here? Can just an endless amount, because it captures power for them, for the bureaucracy. And in the meantime, they don't focus on the big stuff. They're so lost in the nothingness of bureaucracy, that they cannot do the essential stuff anymore. And I think that's probably what happened here. I mean, I don't know that much about federal American regulatory practices regarding crypto. I do know that the United States government has made so many federal laws and regulations that nobody can actually count them. Somebody tried to count them. An academic team tried to find actually what is the number, how many federal laws are there. They couldn't get it. They stopped in the thousands. This is just too many. So I think that this is the tension. We're focusing all of our resources on essentially valueless on things that drag on not just the economy, but on our personal lives, while these governments completely fall down in what actually matters, like regulating a financial exchange like the one FTX was.
Yeah, now let's get into the most horrific part of this entire scandal, other than the scandal itself, which is where we come into your article and many other things. Where, by the way, another article that I would like to say that I found very interesting, which is not to do with the role of the media, but explaining the whole scam itself or scandal itself, is this one was an opinion piece on CoinDesk by David Z. Morris. And he says FTX's collapse was a crime, not an accident. This is a very interesting article. It's a very detailed article on how the whole thing has actually happened. I would highly recommend everybody to go and read this one too. Like, when I read this, I was like, damn, these people, what the hell were they doing? And it's like, just as someone who has worked hard all his life, has tried to make an honest living, and I just look at all this and I was like, yeah. But now let's get into, there are so many facets to this, Ashley. The one is this man and his PR campaign. Now I'm focusing on Sam Bankman-Fried. The other is his relationship with the media and the media portrayal of the same. That is, now it's a subset of the PR campaign, but it has to be dealt with separately. And then the third is his nonchalance. Like, he comes across as someone, like, it's almost as if a young kid, somebody goes like, it's like my mother going to me and telling, Kushal, you've been a bad boy. Sorry,
Right.
mommy.
Right.
That's all I think.
Yeah, I messed up.
I'm sorry, mom.
Oops.
I messed up.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, so let's first start with his relationship with politics. Now, okay, I don't know, Ashley, if you actually heard this, but I want to play this. Like, these things are not normal. This guy was the second highest donor. Everybody knows about it, to the to the Democrats. Everybody knows about it. That's public record. But when I heard this again through Twitter, so bless Twitter for being a great platform, I did not understand how to react. So this is a direct quote shared by Brendan Fisher from the man himself, and I just want to play this for the benefit of our listeners. What the hell is going on over here?
I donated to both parties. I donated about the same amount to both parties this year. That was not generally known because, despite Citizens United being literally the highest profile Supreme Court case of the decade and the thing everyone talks about when they talk about campaign finance, for some reason, in practice, no one can possibly fathom the idea that someone in practice actually gave dark. So, I don't know, all my Republican donations were dark. People won't see them. And the reason was not for regulatory reasons. It's because reporters freak the fuck out if you donate to a Republican. They're all super liberal and didn't want to have that fight. So I just made all the Republican ones dark. But I was, whatever, second or third biggest Republican donor this year as well. But also, it's all for the primaries. They didn't give anything to general elections. They don't give a shit about general elections. It's not what matters. Like, it's the primaries where you have good candidates against bad.
So the only reason he kept his Republican donations dark, and in his own words, he says, I was the third highest donor for the Republicans, the second highest donor for the Democrats. And the only reason he kept his donations dark was that In his words, liberal journalists and people of liberal leaning freak the fuck out. That's his explanation.
Yeah, he's not wrong, and he's got a very good sense of how the media works. I mean, you don't really need to be a media expert to know that that is the case. But a lot of the time, people who are dealing with the media want to pretend that it's not that way, and he didn't need to pretend it to be the case, partly because he was giving everybody so much money. I mean, the sums are spectacular. Every time you hear another figure about the amount of money Sam Bankman-Fried was giving to whoever it was, it's just your jaw drops a little farther open, and it begs the question, or it prompts the question, I should say, why was he giving them all this money? And I think the answer speaks for itself. You're buying influence. I mean, there's not really much. There's not another conclusion you can draw if you're giving both political parties huge sums of money. It's not because you believe in the one party's principle over the other party. It's because you want to influence them to do your bidding, and they did.
Oh boy, they did. And so now we get into the media role. I don't have words, but I'll let you explain. Let's start with okay, it's just your favorite media house, the New York Times.
Yeah.
Can you tell everybody how the New York Times has been covering this, I don't know, shit show for a while now?
The New York Times, I mean, I think actually the best way to think about how they covered him was how they covered him after the scandal blew up. And they did what became a very hotly debated, and what many people called a puff piece about him. And it was really kind of soft, really took off those hard edges, those jagged edges about this character, and kind of cast him as this guy who just kind of like, very much what Sam Bankman-Fried had later said, including directly to the New York Times when he went to their DealBook summit last week, where he was just saying he kind of stumbled into this. And that's what the New York Times actually reported about him. So the piece that they choose to do, the first big piece after the scandal erupts, is not an investigative piece to say, okay, well, it's probably time to unpack this, to look at exactly what happened, who was hurt, how did it all go down. It was a piece about a young guy who really didn't know what he was doing, got himself into a bit more trouble than he was prepared to take on. And this was just like something that people could not understand. How could the New York Times do that? But then what you do is you go back in the New York Times archive and you look at the coverage over the last 2 years or so. That's what the coverage was. It was building up the myth. It was calling him the emperor of crypto. It was talking about this boy genius who was out to save the world through effective altruism. It was Kara Swisher gushing over him, who she's usually pretty harsh when it comes to tech figures. Not this time. And then it was, of course, it spread throughout the media. It wasn't just the New York Times. It was every major news outlet, including many of the outlets that took significant sums of money from him and had not really disclosed that in their coverage of him. You probably could have found it in other places if you were able to dig for it. But to dig for it, you would have to know that they took money. So you would read an article in Vox or in whatever, ProPublica or something, about Sam Bankman-Fried, and it would tell the same story. The story of this just genius who wore terrible clothes and loved to save the world and blah, 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 was so modest and drove a Toyota Corolla. And it didn't talk about the $40 million penthouse he was living in the Bahamas. Certainly never talked about the fact that there was no board for this billion-dollar company. None of that stuff. But they also didn't talk about the fact that in Vox's case, they took huge sums of money for him. Huge. He pledged them $5 million for a media organization that's like in tech, that's like the equivalent of $50 million. Like, it's just enormous. So major conflicts of interest, the clear emergence of a narrative pointing only in one direction. And this is the kicker for me, absolutely zero investigation over 2 years. Zero, nothing. Meanwhile, when you look at New York Times coverage of Elon Musk over the last 2 or 10 years, you could choose your own time frame, it is relentlessly brutal. It is relentlessly negative. It is investigating, it's pulling in all of their resources to tackle this individual, especially since he took over Twitter. But Sam Bankman-Fried got the complete opposite treatment by the media.
You know what shocks me is this specific quote that the Wall Street Journal, in by the way, which was a shit article by the Wall Street Journal, and I'll share the title later on. But this is Sam Bankman-Fried quote: "I feel bad for those who get fucked by it, by this dumb game we woke Westerners play, where we say all the right shibboleths, and so everyone likes us."
Yeah.
I was just, and this was a private chat that was leaked. I clearly remember somebody
With a
shared
reporter, a Vox reporter.
Yeah, yeah, a Vox reporter that leaked leaked this
course.
private chat, and and now just look at. I mean, what the hell is this headline? Like, this is what the journalist or the person who wrote this article in the Wall Street Journal found the problematic bit in. What Donald Trump and Sam Bankman-Fried have in common. This is
Yeah,
all they could think of.
of course.
This is what the Wall Street Journal could come up with. This is their great analysis.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, you know, it's I don't understand that quite from the Journal of all places, because the Journal should have been exactly the outlet doing the financial investigation that they never seem to have done. I don't know why then they would come out with an opinion piece talking about Donald Trump. Of course, the media wants to connect everything to Donald Trump. And if they can't connect it to Donald Trump, it's like it didn't exist. But you know, this is the media that we have today. The for me, the corollary to the media's, I would say, gross misconduct regarding FTX. The flip side, the silver lining in the cloud, is that we saw what I've come to call decentralized media in action. We saw Twitter accounts and CoinDesk and a few other small players like that bring down the giant in literally 2 days. In 2 days, a tweet by Richard Chen, the crypto venture capitalist, a tweet by CZ of Binance, and an article by CoinDesk, and then a few other pieces by other players on Twitter, independent players, mind you, brought down the behemoth that the media, they slayed the monster the media had created for 2 years, and they did it in 2 days. That's really impressive, and I think that's a sign of where things are headed with the media.
Yeah, but you know why I am sharing all of this as a visual evidence, because sometimes people need to see things to realize how full of shit the media is. Like, I know like, how the hell could the New York Times do something like this?
Yeah.
How could they do something like this?
Yeah, and they went through with it, as we know. I mean, they actually kept the engagement. But I think that to me is kind of the point. Is like the Times had made the Times and the rest of them had made the monster, right? This was their creation. It was their baby. He doesn't exist without them. He doesn't exist even with the Super Bowl ads, with Tom Brady and all that brand nonsense. It doesn't mean anything if the media hates you. And it means everything if the media loves you. And the media loved him. There was their child, their brainchild. So of course you're going to protect your child. Why? Because what the child does reflects on the parent. And if the child is made to seem like this evil sociopath who was Bernie Madoff in crypto clothing, then what does the media look like? They look like not just fools, they look like worse than fools. They look like they were accomplices to the fraud. So what's the response? Fix it. Rescue him. Rescue the reputation. Preserve the image. Talk to him. Have a conversation. Ask him, why didn't you know what you were doing? How did you fail to see that this would happen? Don't ask him, when did you become a criminal? They didn't ask that. They asked him, how did you F up so badly? They echo his own message. And it softens the edge. It blunts the anger that people have against him, because it changes. He's still manipulating the media. That's the thing. And they're still manipulating us. That's the interesting thing. It didn't stop when it all blew up. It just changed gear. It just switched direction a little bit.
You know what the worst part was? There was a cost to attend, $2,400 American dollars.
Yeah.
When I just read that photo, and it was like seriously, my life is such a waste. Like, what the hell am I doing? I mean, I gotta find something as ridiculous as and then when like I have to share these things for my viewers is because they should realize what is wrong with society. Like when they do this, like what the hell?
On behalf of everybody here and on behalf of the public, I want to thank you for engaging in it at a time that you've been advised not to. So thank you so very, very much. Sam,
is this all they could think of?
It's not that it's all they could think of. That was the most brilliant part, right? You've got a live audience of intelligent, at least theoretically, intelligent people applauding, right? That's an incredible photo op. What other opportunity would someone who is potentially, allegedly, committed massive fraud, what other occasion would there be for him to have a round of applause by an audience in New York on a stage that is being hosted by Andrew Ross Sorkin with other global leaders? You are just saying to the world, hey, this guy's not so bad, right? Let's clap. He's not as bad as you all think. Actually, he's kind of good. He's brave. You see? He's kind-hearted. He's honest. He showed up. His lawyers said no, but he said yes. That's the message that you were being given in that clip. And it works. It works even on those of us who thinks it doesn't work. That's the crazy part.
And then, as if this shit show is not enough, then he goes, was that Stephanopoulos who interviews him?
Yeah.
Good Morning America, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's the shit show never ends. And then they'll have him saying lines like, quote, I expect I'm gonna have nothing at the end of this. And like, what am I supposed to feel bad for him now? Like, oh, my poor baby, what's wrong with you? Like, are they trying to create sympathy for this guy? Is my long story short question.
They're trying to create a narrative that shows him as not a sociopath and a criminal, but as a hapless young brainiac altruist who made a lot of bad choices. We know that narrative, the bad choices narrative. We've heard a lot about it in the sort of pushback against over incarceration in America. You know, the guy shot someone in the head in a convenience store, an innocent worker, but it was the product of a lot of bad choices. It wasn't his fault. It was circumstance. And that's the same thing we're getting with Sam Bankman-Fried. Lot of bad choices, one after the next. They daisy chained, they dominoed, they end up being something so big that he can't undo it anymore. And there you are removing all the most toxic elements of the story. You're removing all the stuff that clearly points to decision making. Like you're not victim to circumstance and just kind of stumbling into this situation when you're taking customer money and allegedly giving $350 million of it to your employee. I mean, that's not an accident, right? You don't just forget that you did that. It wasn't just something like, oh, instead of putting it in this box, I put it in that box, and the outcome is that someone got nearly $400 million and they happen to be my friend. That's crime. That's corruption in every sense of the word. So that is what they're trying to do with that. Not to show him as a poor baby, but to build a narrative about him as somebody who didn't do it intentionally, so that the media therefore wasn't hoodwinked by a criminal, or wasn't even more so, it wasn't an accomplice to a criminal, but was, they just kind of missed the story because it was a hard story to get. And now they're on the story. It's a different story. Now they got the story, this story. Now Stephanopoulos has got the scoop. Now Andrew Ross Sorkin, they've got the scoop. The scoop is that Sam Bankman-Fried is whatever he says he is. Who cares, right? It's not even a headline. It's nonsense. But again, to me, the bigger picture here is that still today, until today, it's incredible, there's not been the investigative reporting being done. That's the most mind-blowing part.
Yeah, I mean, for people, I'm not going to play it because I know Good Morning America is going to strike me for copyright reasons, but I want you guys to just look at the facial expressions. And I'm not going to play this because I know they'll strike this video, but I want all of you guys to go and see this one. It's Good Morning America, George Stephanopoulos, who interviews Sam Bankman-Fried. When you listen to the tone and tenor of this interview, it literally is that classic case of a 3-year-old who threw something and mommy's like, oh, my poor baby. The way they have treated this person. Now I want to, maybe the next half, we want to focus on what does it do to the future of media. And I want to connect it to something very important. So the Twitter files have been released, right? And I don't know what to say. I got up today morning and my only response to this new Twitter file supplemental by Matt Taibbi, and I'm going to connect it to the FTX thing. I don't know if you went through this, I'm sure you must have. So I don't know how many people went through this Twitter file supplemental that Matt Taibbi wrote about. And so he says here, we can tell you now the reason why they were going to do another expose, which it got released, delayed. So the Twitter Deputy General Counsel and former FBI General Counsel Jim Baker was fired. Among the reasons, vetting of the first batch of Twitter files without knowledge of new management. I mean, what the hell is happening? And if you look at the entire Twitter files saga, not even a single media house of repute, which is there in the mainstream, has spoken about it. They don't even discuss it.
Yeah.
And when they discuss SPF, they discuss it with kid gloves. Now, if this is the situation, Ashley, and you are somebody who's famous now for self-publishing too. So what is the future of content creation then? In this case, Ashley, you are an established publisher, you're an author, you're a journalist, you do independent work. Now, how do we do this? Now, in this case, yes, we did have a successful story where some independent people literally brought something really big down. But is that a sustainable model if we want to keep the integrity of larger institutions alive, when you can pretty much buy anyone off if you have shit tons of money?
I think there's going to be some kind of hybrid model as into the future. I don't think that we're looking at a scenario where mainstream corporate outlets begin to reform themselves in a meaningful way. There's no incentive. I mean, there might be a case here or there, and CNN could be, we'll see what happens, where CNN has undergone some major actual structural changes, not just kind of surface level. It looks like there's been sort of top-down reform being initiated there, partly from some pressure from a major investor, But that's idiosyncratic. That's one off, because if you don't have that particular person pressuring the organization in that particular way, it's not going to happen. There is no bottom up accountability from the media within the media. So I think for the most part, the media will continue to do this kind of thing. They will become more and more committed to their own institutional prerogatives and prejudices, and ideological ones, of course, as well. I think that's just the reality. We're not going back in time to a place where the New York Times is considered, by kind of consent, to be a reliable outlet, or ABC or CBS or NBC News in America. I think what will happen is that the void that has been created when they have kind of mainstream media has kind of pushed themselves into this corner of extreme ideological prejudice and activism, that's left a lot of white space on the table, on the board, and that's being filled now by lots of different kinds of outlets. You look at CoinDesk. I mean, CoinDesk is reputable. They broke a major story. They continued to pursue this. They're doing the investigation that the rest of the media is not doing. They have just, they're new, they're a new player, and they don't have the same kind of ideological commitments that the rest of the media has. So you're going to have a hybrid. You're going to have that. You're going to have, on Twitter, you've got a big account called Autism Capital, who's doing a lot of investigation into SBF. That's now considered reputable. That is something that major players within the industry, within tech, are relying on, people who really know. So that will be a part of this hybrid. Another part, I think, will be something that is more purely decentralized, where you take 5 people on Substack, they're all covering the same kind of stuff. Maybe they're all reporters, maybe they're trained reporters, but they don't work for a corporate media parent. And they'll say, you know what, let's not kind of fragment this picture here. Why don't we all just pool together and cover this beat? And maybe that beat is something like crime in New York City, or maybe it's a local thing in a very small town, or maybe it's something within crypto like regulation, who let's follow. Or maybe it would have been about just FTX. 5 reporters, all they do is cover FTX, doing investigatory work. They would have done, for sure, more good work than the entire mainstream media would or could have done in those 2 years. So I think there's going to be a lot of different forms of media that are appearing, that will appear over the next, I don't know, as we're talking right now, up through the next few years coming, until we see something really transformative emerge. And I think we will see that over the next 5 to 10 years.
The problem I see in India, and I guess in the United States of America, or in the Western world in general, this would be a lesser problem, because there the society, merely by the virtue of the society being financially well off, these problems can be minimized, that you can be an independent Substack journalist like Matt Taibbi is. Interestingly, even I think Matt Iglesias was also with Vox, right? And then he moved out, and now he is probably one of the top folks when it comes to Substack. Barry Weiss has moved out of New York Times, and she's pretty much established herself on Substack. So there is scope, because there are people who are willing to pay in the United. Like, I'll give you an example. In India, let's say in India, we're not at the financial level of other countries. Now, I don't know if you know about this whole Wire and Meta scandal that happened in India. There was this Indian portal, and they just literally made shit up. They literally made shit up, and then they eventually got caught with their pants down. It takes a lot of effort to make sure that Meta is on the good side of anything in general. But they did that. They gave Meta that moment. So in such a scenario in India, what happens is, a lot of these media houses, they rely heavily on government funding. Let's say, there is the Life Insurance Corporation of India, and you're running this media house, and the LIC will stop giving you ads just like that. The government, let's say I live in Maharashtra, the province of Maharashtra, or in the municipal corporation of Mumbai, they have a huge budget, the huge advertising budget, and then they control the print media like this. And in such a scenario, in India, where the problem in India is that there are amazing journalists like this guy who came on my podcast called Samarth Bansal, brilliant journalist, excellent work, truth seeker, writes a beautiful newsletter, and he actually explained the whole wire and meta saga, and he had even broken the previous nonsense done at the same media outlet then too. But the point is, like, the issue where maybe in the United States of America you could do this, where I myself am subscribed now to, I don't pay money to any mainstream media outlet. I go and find good Substack people and I give them money, and I try to extract information from there. But the point is, like, how do we do this at a global level then? Like, how do we do this, let's say, in countries like India, where if you don't have an OB van, because these OB vans have a lot of monetary costs involved, and only mainstream media outlets can do that kind of reporter. So how do we solve that problem?
I think it's going to be, again, hybrid. So it's still the case today that, really to cover the war in Ukraine for an American audience, you need a network or a major newspaper, because even the most successful Substack can't do that. It's too expensive. It takes too much resource. So for that kind of thing, we are all relying on those kinds of organizations. With regard to how do you do it, I think it's, you just do whatever you can, so that if you are an independent journalist in India and you are not able to recruit enough subscription to finance your life, basically, as a professional, you don't do it in a professional capacity. You work a job, and if you have an hour, 2 hours, or 3 hours in the evening or afternoon or whatever, whenever you can find the time, that's when you do that thing. And if you do that with 3 or 4 other people, there might just be enough content there to deliver a good enough message consistently enough that people take you seriously. And from there, how does that monetize exactly? I don't know. But I do know that when enough people take somebody seriously and come to depend on them for something, there is monetary value of some kind. But I think what we saw with the history of the United States is developing a decentralized approach to media, and they still are in the process of doing it right now. That's a lot of what it looked like. It didn't look like someone, Barry Weiss and Matt Taibbi and Matt Iglesias and maybe 5 or 10 other people are really earning a good living. Maybe, 30, 40, 50, 100 other people, journalists, are earning a living on Substack. Out of however many thousands of journalists and writers on Substack there are, not very many are actually making a living. Most of them are doing it in concert with other things that they do. So maybe they write books, maybe they work jobs, maybe they are, who knows what it is. But I think you kind of just do whatever it is you need to do. And the history of the United States, the media or independent media, is the same thing. Most of these people who got big were started out as bloggers, and they weren't getting paid as bloggers. I mean, that was certainly the case, I think, for Matt Iglesias, some of the Vox people. They built up these big audiences that came to trust them, and they got to a point where they could start Vox and got investment for it and started their own thing. And it's good. I think where Vox has gone after that is a different story, but the way that they got there is a good way. Get in it, put the hours you can, build a team around it of people who are committed to the mission, and earn trust through your quality and consistency over time. That will deliver results.
And eventually it comes down to that, like, and you made the right point that we only remember the success stories on Substack. We forget the large number of people that who even don't rise to the top on Substack. The same goes for podcasting. People don't realize, they just look at Joe Rogan and his 100 million deal with Spotify. They don't realize that even in podcasting, it's only the top 5% that really make a fantastic living. Everybody else just has a podcast as a side gig, and they don't really monetize it. And it blows my mind. Now, the last bit, I don't know if you have an opinion on it, and what do you think this does to crypto in general? How much has this sullied the image of cryptocurrencies in general? The entire look, I don't say this in a facetious way, because I genuinely don't mean to, but this entire crypto bro image that is out there in the landscape of ideas, like, what does this do to crypto then?
I think it's probably an inflection point for crypto where we go from this kind of massive speculative bubble where, I mean, it was crazy. I'm involved in a project that is kind of crypto adjacent, and initially people were saying like, oh, I would explain, I'm like, okay, also we'll put together a business plan. They're like, no. That's Web 2. You need to think Web 3, which is that you put out a logo and put something stealth on LinkedIn and issue a coin and everyone's going to pay you. And I'm like, that doesn't make any sense. That's talk about a Ponzi scheme. That sounds like a Ponzi scheme. That's really what was going on in crypto for the last 2-3 years. It was such a gold rush. But even that is an inappropriate term, because the gold rush, at least there was gold underneath it all. This was literally nothing for so many of these projects. Nothing, absolutely nothing. Someone would create a logo, a name, they would issue a coin, and they would take the money, and then they would fold the project, and that was that. And this happened over and over. People kept investing. I think this obviously is the end of that. It's the end of the tulip craze of crypto, and we are probably inflecting, I think, to a point where it's going to be more about the technology. So if there is an underneath the soil, underneath the froth, as there was with gold, there was a mineral. I think for crypto, that mineral is technology. There's actual fascinating technology that you speak with people, and I speak with enough young developers, programmers, and they're really, really excited about blockchain and related Web3 technologies. They really feel that is where the future is, and that's, I think, why there is a future here. What we got rid of now was just the BS froth, the BS speculation, just like in the .com crash, where you would have people, some graduate students running 4 businesses in 1998, 1999, all of them financed, capitalized, and then suddenly it all went away because it wasn't real. What was left over in 2000, 2001, etc., was real, was Google, and was everything that came out, Facebook, and whatever came after that. So I think we are going to inflect to the tech, and I think in the long term this will be a good thing for what we call crypto. And I think we'll probably also find a better way to speak about crypto rather than using something that refers that's linked to the notion of the currency, where the only meaningful currencies today feel like Bitcoin and Ethereum. I could be wrong. I'm not by any means an expert. But I think when we start talking more about Web3, more talking about underlying technologies, about the concept of decentralization, just as we are talking about decentralizing the media, and how do we pull in Web3 technologies to power the decentralization of media? How, to answer your previous question, maybe there comes a time where it doesn't matter if somebody's in India, if they're reporting and they're doing investigative, hardcore data-based investigation into a company like FTX, and I'm sitting in the United States or in Holland or in Brazil or wherever, and I have a vested interest in the topic because I'm an investor, and I'm saying, yeah, I'm going to pay this guy $2 a month, and so are 8,000 people on the subreddit on this topic, because we need this. So now that you're in India, it makes no difference. Your geography makes no difference to this picture. What matters is that you are doing the good work on the right topic. So I think that's a lot of where this is going to come through as well.
Yeah, I kind of see, full disclosure, I've never understood this. Like, well, what the hell is that NFT thing? I have never understood that NFT concept. It just goes above my head. I really tried very hard to understand it. And if it is something very profound, I have no problem in accepting that I am stupid, because I do not get it. I do not understand NFTs. I do not understand how they create that value. I mean, it's just a digital photo. What the hell? And I don't understand it.
Scarcity. That's all it is, right? I could give you a picture of Picasso worth $100 million, the original, and I could have someone create an exact replica of it. Exact. That even a great art expert would not be able to tell the difference. One of them is worth $100 million and one of them is worth almost nothing. Why? Because one of them is linked. It's linked to a chain of events that brought it to this moment. and we as a community believe that that chain of events holds unique value. It's our belief system. The same thing with that NFT. There was that one file that is unique. That's what the NFT does. It makes it unique amongst all other JPEGs. It is now got a unique identifier that is bound to the file. That makes it unique. That connects it to a chain of events in which a community invests enough of its interest and resources that it makes it valuable. And that it's another great example. The NFT thing's a great example for what I was just talking about. Most of the kind of cosmetic value we saw with NFTs, the Bored Apes being sold for millions of dollars, that's gone away. It's not coming back. Maybe in the future there will be, over time, NFT art NFT pieces that do rise again to that level over time. But what will happen with NFTs, and what's already happening with NFTs, is they're being used for their technological value. They're being used as a piece of technology, so that if you give me a digital file, so if you give me a digital ticket, if I buy a ticket to a concert and you give me a file that shows a paper ticket, same problem as we had before, I could copy that file a million times and send it to all my friends, and now you've all got tickets. But if it's an NFT and it's linked to a unique identifier, that's only one, it's only for me. So that's one use case for NFTs among thousands that we will see unfolding in the next months and years. And it will be the underlying technology and not the cosmetic speculative appeal that we'd seen over the last 2-3 years, where everyone was just rushing to get in before, it was really driven by FOMO, fear of missing out. Like if I don't get in right now, I'm going to lose that ability to make X number of dollars. They rushed in, and a lot of those people obviously got burned. But what will come out of this is a lot of really great technology.
When I listen to all of this, I just realize I'm so old. I don't know. I just feel so old when I listen to things. I genuinely am so away from all of this. But the one thing I think is going to happen, which is not going to be auguring well for crypto in general and all these concepts in general, is because it has happened in America, and because of the disproportionate influence whatever America tends to have on global discourse. All other countries are going to be very conservative when it comes to crypto in general, and they're going to pull back on crypto. So all the crypto lobbyists or people who are very positive on crypto, they need to figure out how they separate the FTX saga and the crypto fall with the general imposition, because people in general, they're once bitten, twice shy is the natural way of human beings. And I already see that India is clearly getting away from all of this. India has raised its hands and said, we're not getting into this. We have nothing to do with this, because we already have enough scams in India. We don't need to add one more scam in India. So India is not doing it. I don't know about other countries. I think China is also tightening the noose on many of these things. Let's see where it goes. But what do you make of the future? Because at the end of the day, you just can't keep banking on America to let things go, right?
You mean the future of crypto and future of Web3? I think it generally will be, there will be some regulation around the financial aspect, meaning the trading as a security. Like these things function like securities. You would buy it, hold it, sell it for more, or sell it at a loss. But when you think about it as a technology, it's harder to regulate it as a technology. So if it's not connected to a coin, if your technology is not connected to a coin, there's no reason that it needs to be, and it does fall into the Web3 realm, it will be developed like any other technology, and it will face the same challenges and headwinds. There will, of course, be a lot more regulation of anything to do with the financial element, and that will include things like trading of coins, currency. It will also include regulation of what is now known as DeFi, or decentralized finance, where people are able to loan money to other groups or other people directly without a centralized intermediary. That, I'm guessing, is going to see some significant regulation to the extent that that's possible. Because the problem for governments with all this is, and why they don't like it so much, is that you don't need the government to regulate it or not regulate it. It's a computer. So if I want to set up a DeFi company that loans money from among podcasters in a unique way, what stops me from doing it? I guess I could end up breaking the law if I live in this country, or I could go somewhere else, just like Sam Bankman-Fried did, and set it up and run it, and it really can't be stopped, at least not technologically. So it's going to be a mixed bag. Yes, some countries will back away. I don't think you're going to have the I believe it's El Salvador. These countries that are starting to quasi adopt Bitcoin as a national currency, or Estonia. But I do think you are going to continue to see some countries, and even in the United States, some states within the US are much more friendly and are much more open to Web3, blockchain, crypto than other states. So it's going to be case by case. China, yes, you're right. China's clamped down in a huge way. They've stopped. They no longer permit mining Bitcoin in China, and China was the biggest location of Bitcoin mining in the world, because it's all the same thing. They can't control it. And the Chinese government really doesn't like what they can't control, like most governments. But in that case, it's a very extreme version of it. And the United States also is not very friendly towards financial elements that it can't control. It doesn't really like that. But again, I think we're going to be looking more towards the technology, the underlying technologies, and less at the sort of speculative froth for the future, at least in the next few months and years.
All right, let me just ask you a question from a live viewer. First of all, I think he's read your book and he's a fan of yours.
Oh, thank you.
So,
great.
so the question is that, like, do you see any hope for the future in the mainstream media? I'm re-summarizing his question. Like, they still try to sell SBF scam as an accounting mistake even after all of this. Do you have any hope of reform in mainstream media in the future?
No, not really. I think there's a lot of very good reporters working for these outlets, very good editors. I know them. I work with some of them, and there are some outlets that are very good. And it also, I want to point out, it does differ from country to country. I mean, I think the United States with the woke capture is particularly bad right now. I think sometimes it's better abroad. But in general, no, I don't think there is really any incentive to reform, because it's the incentives, it's the perverse incentives that have gotten them to this point. How do you change the incentives? There is no incentive to change the incentives, because the current incentives serve everyone involved. That's the problem. That's why it's so entrenched. So I don't really see that being the case, not anytime soon. But I do think we will have at least an alternative going forward.
I hope you're right, because my whole worry in this entire process has been the mainstream media does not realize how badly their image is hit, and it has nothing to do with and when I say mainstream media, I don't mean left-wing media, I mean all media. It doesn't matter if you're CNN or Fox News. I just think they're all rubbish. I mean, that's where I'm coming from, and this is not good. I mean, my first ever podcast with you was about the truth. If you remember, the first thing I asked you ever as a question was the truth, because the truth matters the most. And if we lose the truth, and if a society can't function where people don't even trust each other, a trust deficit society is the most dangerous thing for any society. And that's been my biggest worry in this entire process. And COVID did a real number on everyone. Post COVID, there was an erosion of truth, and now you have this FTX scandal, and now there is even further erosion of truth, and you just see how easy it is to buy the media, and it's really worrying. But before I wrap up today's podcast, so any last points that you want to say that maybe I missed out or something?
No, I don't think so. I think it's, I think it's good to be what we're doing right now, which is sort of being vigilant. Like, let's look and be honest and be open. And I think that's the way forward, and not, on the one hand, to demonize the media, and on the other hand, not to consider them our savior, but to find that middle ground of skepticism, healthy skepticism. Sometimes that borders into cynicism, which is also okay. But yeah, I think the positive note here is where audiences, news consumers are today. They're eager, they're leaning forward, they're asking the right questions, they are searching. And that's, I think, the best part of all this.
Man, I hope you're right, because as someone who, I mean, I'm a disbeliever, so the only thing I got is the truth. And sometimes when I look at all of this, I was like, where am I gonna go? I don't even have a religion to fall back
Right.
on. Like, all I was left with was this stuff, and now these things are also getting questioned. But man, Ashley, it's always been a pleasure to talk to you. When I read people like you, or when I read some other journalists, or authors, I always feel, okay, there's some hope left. So as always, thanks a lot for coming, and I wish you all the best, buddy.
Thank you so much, Kushal. Great to see you. We'll be in touch.
All right, guys, we'll wrap it up. But before we wrap it up, as always, when you look into the description of the podcast, you will find Ashley's Twitter handle. You'll find the link to his website. Go and buy his book, The Grey Lady Winked. If you've not, you can buy other books too. But all the books to buy his work is there in the website. So please go and support Ashley. He's a great writer, a fantastic author. I think we can all learn a lot from Ashley's conduct. And trust me, read The Grey Lady Winked if you've not. And as far as I'm concerned, you know the drill. You can support the Cārvāka podcast by subscribing to my channel, liking this video, leaving a comment, or you can become a member on Fanmo or YouTube or Patreon, or just send your donations to UPI or buy the Cārvāka podcast merch. I'll see you guys next time. Until then, namaste. Take care. Bye-bye.